Hi everyone, good morning. Hello. I know it's Sunday morning. Everyone's a little sleepy.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, nice to see you all. Thanks so much for waking up early today. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
Awesome. Shiva, is my layout okay?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. Just let me know when we're ready to start as well in terms of quorum.
We're actually ready to start.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you everyone for making the time for attending this session. Very excited to have you all here. I'm one of the mentors for JSPF this year. Please excuse the really loud bird in my background. I am hoping that in about an hour it'll chill out and stop doing this. I promise I'm not outdoors, I'm actually inside my house. Okay, so this is the last of our 4 mentorship sessions. No pressure. The topic we're going to cover today is identifying a career interest and acing your interview, because that's the next stage in your process. You're all going to be attending interviews soon, and that's the topic we want to cover today. So we have about 1.5 hours together today, and I'll be going over both. I'll be pausing for questions at points in between. So I'd really appreciate if all of you can just hold your questions until when we pause for questions in the breaks. Okay. Yeah. And if you guys can't hear me, or if there's some kind of internet issue or something else on the way, feel free to just stop me and I can just repeat myself. So let me start by just introducing myself, saying a little bit about myself, and then I'd love to hear from a couple of you about yourselves to just know more about who's in our audience today. So I'm Shriya Suryanarayanan. I was a graduate from NIT Trichy in 2018. I am from Chennai. I was born here and I was raised here. What you see there, that's the Besanagar beach, very close to where I live. I went to NIT Trichy from 2014 to 2018, and I graduated from the Instrumentation and Control Engineering department. Right after college, actually during college, I interned at Procter and Gamble, and then I went on to work full time there as well. So I worked in the Goa plant of P&G, which was a very interesting experience because, well, right out of college, I got to work in Goa for a couple of years. So that was fun. I worked as a process engineer and then a project manager at one of our manufacturing locations for the Whisper brand. Post PNG, I also developed a deep interest in sustainability during my time there, and I wanted to work in that space full time. So then I pivoted into a role at a company called Ubuntu. It's a startup based in Atlanta. And what they do is basically management consulting and strategy consulting for clients specifically focused on sustainability problem statements. It's also a tech platform, and there's a host of solutions there that we help curate, which solve different environmental challenges in the world. So right now I'm with Ubuntu as a consultant and really loving my job here and getting to learn a lot about sustainability on a day-to-day basis. So in August, in the fall, I'm also headed to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for doing an MBA. So I'm going to the Ross School of Business there. So this is a little bit about my trajectory in the last few years. Happy to take questions about any of these places at the end of the session. So a little bit outside of work and academics, I really love to read. I've always been a big reader. Haven't found as much time for it in the recent years. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. Once you go into college, there's just not time for these things anymore. So I've been on a bit of a sabbatical there, but starting to pick up reading again. That's something I'm really enjoying. I'm also a big fan of all things public speaking. I really enjoy it. I love being on stage. I love speaking. And which I guess also kind of explains why this topic for my mentorship session, because I really believe in just presentation skills and that's something that can be developed and not something that's innate to all of us. And I've constantly worked on those skills, and hopefully I can give you a few tips about how you can too. So offshoot of my interest in public speaking, I also host a podcast. It's called Footprint, A Guide to Sustainable Living. You can find it on avaz.com and their English website. It's basically a podcast about sustainable living, as it says. Just we cover different topics with entrepreneurs and influencers in that space who give you tips on how to live more sustainably. Final thing about me is, very related to what I just said. I'm very passionate about climate change and the waste crisis. These are issues I hope to solve throughout my career, and I want to be able to focus on them. So that's my overall interest area for the future as well. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to pause here and invite a couple of you to just share a brief introduction. Just tell me where you're from, what department you're in, and maybe one or two hobbies that you like to do in your free time. You guys want to raise your hands, or you can just go. Yes, Nagavali.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, Nagavali. Hello.
Hello, ma'am. I'm HRSS Nagavalli Chatla. I'm living in Andhra Pradesh, East Godavari, and I'm from Triple department. Mm-hmm. And I like reading books, listening music, and watching videos.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nagavali. Nice to hear from you. And does anyone else want to go? Just introduce yourself. Hi, Parvat.
Hello, I'm Parvat from Chennai, Tamil Nadu. I belong to civil department, first year civil department, and my hobbies are to watch sci-fi movies, then read about space, and my recent interest is in Photoshop.
Photoshop. Wow. Okay. There's one thing I kept telling myself I'll learn next year in college, and then I never did. Thanks, Parvat. Does anybody else want to go? We can take one more person.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, but I'm sorry. Who is speaking?
Akshay.
Akshay. Hi, Akshay.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Akshay. I'm from the wonderful city of Chennai. I'm in the mechanical department. My hobbies include usual, productive tasks like binge watching Netflix series, watching some MMA fights, and just going hiking in general whenever I feel like it. But now, due to the COVID restrictions, I'm kind of stuck at home.
That's awesome. Hopefully you can resume soon because you guys still have 3 years of college ahead. I'm confident you're going to have a normal experience very soon on campus. And then there's lots of nature around Trichy that you could explore. Thanks, everyone. So hopefully I can hear from all of the rest of you as well through the course of this session. We've got a bunch of activities lined up, so everyone's going to get a chance to kind of interact. I really hope to keep this interactive, so feel free to speak up, guys. Okay, now to get started, I want to speak about the first part of this presentation. First, just sort of finding your career interest. And I worded it that way deliberately, right? As a career interest and not as a passion. Because personally, my view is that there is no one single passion for everybody, one single sort of true path that you have to take. I believe that's a myth. And if we're going after that, we're never really going to be happy with the choices that we make in our careers. So instead, what I'm going to focus on is just being able to, out of the thousands of options that are there ahead of us, just trying to give you guys a framework on how we can potentially narrow down into one interest area. So that's sort of the thought behind this. And you guys can feel free to, okay, I just got a message from Himanshu that I'm on mute. Can the rest of you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, Himanshu, I'm sorry. I think it's your audio. Maybe you can just try leaving audio and then connecting again. If that doesn't work, you can quit the meeting and come in again, and Siva will add you. Okay. So, and I know that you guys are in your first year, so you're far from thinking about your careers and thinking about even placements or jobs, right? But the reason I believe it's important to have this conversation right now is because what you do have ahead of you is 3 sets of internships. And those are really critical opportunities in helping you figure out what is that first job you want to do that you're actually going to enjoy. So to be able to kind of plan those internships out so that you actually learn about things that you're interested in, I'm hoping this framework kind of helps you guys. We won't spend too long on it. Just a second. Yeah. So in terms of finding a career interest, you've probably seen this Venn diagram before, right? There's stuff you love to do, stuff that you're good at, which is your skills, and then stuff that someone will pay you to do that you can actually get hired for. And the intersection of that is where your dream job lies. You've probably seen this Venn diagram. It was also there in Ashwini's session. So if you've attended our second mentorship session, you've seen it there as well in terms of choosing projects. You've probably also seen this diagram, which is Ikigai. Great book. You can read that on the side. It's basically, there's one more sphere that's added to this, which is what the world needs, right? Something that's actually useful for the world, a purpose. And people are usually proven to be happier in their jobs if they're associated with a certain purpose. So you've seen all of these things before, but I think the real challenge is it's not easy to figure out what falls under each of these circles for us. So how do I start, right? How do I go about figuring what am I good at? What do I love to do? What are things that someone will pay me to do, right? That last one is probably one of the toughest because we're kind of in protected environments like school or college. So it's not easy to figure out what falls under these circles. So how do we start? I think the first important thing is for us to internalize the difference between what constitutes a skill and what constitutes an interest. A skill is something that you're good at. You could be good at math, right? You could be good at, you could be good at drawing. But do you like drawing? Do you enjoy it? Do you like math? That's a whole different ballgame. And I'm sure a lot of people in the Indian engineering college context can actually relate to this, right? That we find ourselves being analytical people, good at math, good at a bunch of subjects, good at physics, etc. But maybe you don't really enjoy it, but you just go ahead pursuing those paths anyway because it's easier to pursue something that we're good at. So it's important to internalize that difference and start thinking more in terms of what interests you, right? And when I say interest, different ways to paraphrase that question is what energizes you? What would you not mind staying up late at night working on after an extremely long day? So these are some of the things that you need to think about in terms of identifying that difference. And the other way to kind of think about this is to start with picking something that falls under two of these boxes and then do, what I'm going to talk about, one of these three things, to expand that to fill your third box. It's a lot easier to think about, what's an intersection of two of the Venn diagrams instead of thinking about all three at once. So for example, there's stuff I love to do, right? You make a list of all of the things you're really interested in, you're very passionate about, right? So for example, Parvat just spoke about space. He's very interested in space, right? So that could be an area that you're very interested in. It doesn't have to be extremely specific. It doesn't have to be, I want to do this particular job and this is going to be my job title within the overall space, within that overall topic or area. It doesn't have to be that specific. It's just something you love to do. It's something you really are interested in. Any job within that space is probably something that's going to interest you. And then stuff someone will pay you to do could be potential jobs within that space, right? Like a researcher, an analyst, an astronaut. So all of these different jobs that fall under something that someone will pay you to do, these are existing job titles. You've made a list of these two. Then it's just about figuring out how you can get good at that, right? So what you need to do in that case is upskill, which is identify what you like, identify job titles, look at the descriptions, look at the skills that people require for that job, and start to get good at it. So, which is why the first point was about internalizing the difference between skills and interests, because skills can be acquired, but interests cannot, right? Interests are something that's innate to us. Well, yes, technically you can acquire an interest later in life, your interests can change, but largely the kinds of things that excite you and kinds of things you like to do remain the same throughout our lives. But skills are something that we can constantly acquire. And we talk about growth mindset in JSPF, right? And if you go up and read a little bit about growth mindset, I'm sure you have already because our reading lists every month cover a lot of literature on that topic. And that's exactly what growth mindset is about, right? Just believing that you can get better at something with consistent effort. So upskill to get better at things if it falls under what you love to do and something that someone will pay you to do. Now, let's say you figured out something in the other two boxes, something you're good at, right? Like you're great at math, right? For example, you're really analytical, you're really good with numbers, you're really good at solving problems. Then there's stuff someone will pay you to do. This list is probably very exhaustive because we have a very quant-focused world. So this list is probably huge, right? In terms of very analytical and number crunching focused jobs. So you probably listed a bunch of those things. Now it's about figuring out stuff that you love to do within that. In that case, what you need to do is diversify. Now, what I mean by diversify is in most organizations, when you join a company, let's say you join in one functional role, right? Like let's say you join the company as a data analyst within their financial services industry, right? Like let's say you are someone who is really good at numbers. So you're a data analyst, you work on analytics software, you do a lot of number crunching for maybe management consultants who present it to somebody else, or you do it directly for clients, you do it for the internal company, it could be anything. You're under their finance department and you're a data analyst within a company. When I say diversify, once you spend a year or two in that company, you'll have a very good understanding of what people with a similar skill set to yours are doing in potentially other departments. Or you'll see your peers in other industries doing a similar job, right? And that's what I mean by diversify. You can seek out these opportunities, you can ask for these opportunities and move to them. Maybe what you really like are the arts, but this is what you're good at, which is numbers, and you want to move into a more creative field. So most creative firms, right? For example, companies that make content for television, advertising agencies, PR firms, these are more creative focused firms, or the marketing department in itself in most places, because they're coming up with ads, they're a very creative function. So maybe that's what you're interested in, but you could fit this role within such a company, so that overall you still feel a sense of purpose. You feel like you're working towards an area that you're really passionate about, which is getting great content to people, which is creating wonderful art. But your role in that overall puzzle is a more quantitative focused role. So you get more purpose out of doing that everyday role. And that's what I mean by diversifying and trying out different opportunities within that. Now, the third one, which is you figured out what you're good at. It's also something you love doing, but nobody's going to pay you to do that, right? Or at least that's what you think at this point. In which case, what you need to kind of focus on is to build. And when I say build, I mean creating your own projects, right? Creating your own opportunities. So for example, let's take the same example, right? Someone who's a data analyst inside a financial services company, but you figured out that what you love to do is to build, what you love to do is have a social impact, right? That's something you really enjoy, helping vulnerable communities, helping the poor. So you've probably come up with a financial model that checks how efficient it is to invest in different charitable foundations and how to optimize philanthropy money, right? How to optimize charity money into investing it into the right avenues. Now you can use your finance skills for that. It's something that you love doing because it's for a cause that you care about. And when I say build, I don't mean start a company necessarily. And that's an excellent option, right? Like there's lots of opportunities for entrepreneurship just on the NIT campus itself. I have lots of batchmates who've successfully pursued that. That's one whole aspect of build, which is to start up, be an entrepreneur. Another aspect is just pitch it to your company. Within your role, you go there and you tell them, this is something that I've come up with. I think this is a great idea. And this can be excellent for, let's say, our CSR initiative. Or this can be excellent for our clients in the social impact industry. So in that case, you build, which is you go and pitch something, you create an opportunity where none exists so that you're able to do what you love doing, as well as something that you're very skilled at. So I'm going to pause for a second here for everyone to just kind of absorb that. I know it was a lot of information. And maybe we'll pause for the questions, specific questions in the end, but if you guys want me to repeat any part of that, just let me know. Okay, can I assume there are no questions on that part? All right. Okay, that was surprising. I really thought that was going to be a very confusing graph, and I wasn't sure if I'd done a good job at communicating that. But okay, moving on. Let's go more specifically to locating your industry and your function sweet spot, right? What I mean by this, and I'll explain in a bit, and this can be a lot of information, but what I want you guys to do is you will have access to this presentation and this entire talk because it's going to be on YouTube. So you can come back to this slide anytime and use it as a reference as you begin to find more and more opportunities for internships in each of your summer and winter vacations, or even while you're on campus. What do I mean by function? A function is your specific role within a company. For example, are you a programmer? Are you a data analyst? A business analyst? Are you a project manager, right? Are you handling a team? Are you handling a project and taking care of scheduling it, getting money for it, etc.? Are you a process engineer in a manufacturing industry, right? You're working on the equipment. You're working to optimize different things. So these are all things you will begin to see. I know right now, these look like alien terms to you, but you will begin to see these different words in job descriptions when you start to look for opportunities for how you can work outside of the NIT Trichy campus. So this is what you call a function, right? Your functional role within a wider organization. And then there is industry. What I mean by an industry is, where does that company fit in the world in terms of the different services that they offer? What kind of services does this company offer, and what can they be categorized alongside other companies? So for example, there is the banking industry. There is the consumer goods industry. So what I mean by consumer goods is things you and I use every day. The companies that make our toothpaste and our shampoo and soap, things like that. So that's your consumer goods industry. Then you have your tech hardware industry, right? The kinds of companies that make your chips, that make phones, for example, so or laptops. This is tech hardware. And then you have your software industry, right? Your Googles and Facebooks and Microsofts of the world. Then you have management consulting. There is a new club in NIT Trichy that covers management consulting now, which is very exciting, I think. Then you've got retail, which is your stores, right? Something that's customer facing, your stores where you sell things, everything from your Chroma to your, Reliance, the clothes shop, or your selling devices. All of these are things in the retail industry. Then you have your oil and gas industry. Now, both of these lists are not exhaustive. There's probably 20 other things I can list in industry, like 50 other things that I can, list in function. But I've just given you a snapshot of a few of them, right? And I've tried to put in things that are most likely for someone from NIT Trichy to end up at the end of 4 years. The kinds of companies that come for placements and the kinds of roles that they open up for. So these are some very common ones, but there's really a lot more. It's quite exhaustive. Now, once you've identified each role, you need to break that up into what function is this and what industry is this. And that'll really help you do what I spoke about in the previous slide, right? That'll really help you. For example, the industry could fall under something you love to do, something that you're very, very interested in. But maybe the function is what you're very good at. The example we spoke about being, for example, someone who works on financial analytics, right? Like data analytics, but for a social impact cause, for the cause of education, or for the cause of for the vulnerable populations. So for helping people, right? So these are two different things. So once you identify whether your role falls under a particular function or an industry, it'll be very easy for you to figure out which one out of this is something I love doing and which one is something I'm good at. And then the rest of it becomes very easy to piece together. So I'm going to give you an example. So my case, right, my personal example, what happened is that I started as a process engineer at P&G. So P&G was a consumer goods company. That's the industry that it falls under. And my role was a process engineer. I worked on equipment. Now, the reason I went for a process engineer role was because it helped me apply technology. It was predominantly on the application of technology and a lot more related to managing projects, which I realized I really enjoyed, right? I didn't enjoy programming. I didn't enjoy working with large sets of numbers. I was not very quantitatively aligned, but I really loved working with teams, working with other people, and working on the applications of technology using my background. And then I went on to become a project manager at P&G. So these were the two roles that I did while I was in the consumer goods industry. Post that, I told you guys that I moved to Ubuntu, right? Which is a management consulting firm. And I'm a project manager there. Because when I did that at P&G, I realized that that's a role I really love, right? I love doing project management. I love working with huge teams, people from different backgrounds, people from different geographies. I'm a very organized person. So I really like scheduling. I really like managing timelines, managing budgets, and making plans for projects for execution. So I figured out that's something I love doing. And I was also good at, right? So that fit that box for me. But something I was very passionate about, which I also think the world needs, was working in sustainability and climate change for the environment. And I wasn't getting an opportunity to do that in my current role. So I needed to expand, right? I needed to diversify and be able to find that in a different industry. And I found that with Ubuntu, with management consulting, where we help clients be more sustainable. So do you see how this became this for me? And I'm nowhere close to done, right? I still haven't figured it out. I still haven't figured out what is that perfect sweet spot for me, that intersection. But this is sort of how I approach it in my life. And that's the advice I'd want to give you guys about how you're approaching it as well. I also want to point out that in reality, this path isn't always going to look all, straight lines, neat lines. It's going to look a lot more like this, right? You're going to end up finding things that are outside of this matrix in a new industry, in a new function that's not even in this little box. You're going to oscillate a lot between different industries and different roles through your 4 years in college, as well as overall. For example, I did an internship every summer while I was in college, right? So my first year, I did a content management internship, and then I did one in a bank. My second year, I went on to do, a little bit of analytics and automation at a digital marketing company. My third year, I went to do process engineering at Procter & Gamble. And then I did that after college. And then I went on to do project management at a consulting company. So my path already looks like this. It already looked all over the place within those 4 years in college. And it's probably going to continue to look that way as I figure out what I like, right? But throughout this time, it's important to remember this framework and just keep that in mind. So we're done with this section, with this slide. And before I move on to, acing your interviews and talking a lot about some skills you can develop for doing really well in interviews, I'm going to pause to take any questions on what I've spoken about so far. You guys can drop it in the chat if you don't want to. So I see a question from Harshit in the chat, how interests can be same as skills. So Harshit, precisely, you've got it spot on. So your interests are not the same as your, I think there's an echo. So your interests are not the same as your skills, right? And that's the first thing that you need to kind of internalize and remember. Let me just go back to that slide. Yeah. So internalizing the difference between your skills and your interests is one of the first things we really need to recognize. Skills are something that you're good at. Interests are something that energizes you, that you love doing and you wouldn't mind staying up at night doing. So that's what your interest constitutes. And it's really important to know the difference between the two so that you're not tempted to pursue something that's more about only your skills while not being something that's interesting to you. And that's the mistake that people often end up making, right? So it's very important to know the difference. Are there any other questions? Have I really been that clear? Or people are just very sleepy and I've put you to sleep? Guys, let me know which one it is. Thanks, Harshit. Everyone else, you're good to go? Unmute yourselves and just let me know. Are we good to go? Very clear so far?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay.
Yeah, we can continue.
Okay, awesome. Yes. So now we come to the part that you guys are probably a lot more interested about because it's the immediate next step in your process, which is acing any interview. So we're going to cover some of the basics of interview preparation today, right? The first one is preparation. The second is presentation. And the third is your structure and your timing. So if you walk away with nothing else from this presentation today, I want you guys to walk away remembering these three terms, right? Because once you remember this, what I talk for the next hour or so is going to come rushing back to you as long as you remember these headings. Preparation, presentation, structure, and timing. These are the three key things for any interview. So let's kind of tackle them, one by one, right? And we'll start with preparation. And under preparation, there are a few important things to remember. The first one is figuring out what is going to be the type of your interview. Is it a behavioral interview, a technical interview, or a case interview. Now, these are the three most popular kinds of interviews. There could be others. There could be mix and match of both. For example, it could be a technical interview with 15 minutes of behavioral questions at the end. But these are essentially the three types of interviews, right? So identifying what type of interview it is the first important step. Now, at the end of the session, I'm also going to tell you guys about the JSPF interview process specifically and what that entails. So you'll be able to relate and map that to what we're talking about here. But this is overall for any interview that you're going to face. For other scholarships you may apply to, for other internships, jobs, etc. So what is a behavioral interview? A behavioral interview is one where they typically ask you questions like, tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you showed leadership in your actions. Tell me about a time when you were very challenged in your job and you found it very difficult to overcome. Tell me about a time when you failed. Tell me about a time when you worked in a team alongside other people. So these are all potential questions in a behavioral interview. It's essentially about your life experiences, situations in your life, and asking you to articulate them and to speak about these situations so that the interviewer can get a better understanding of where you come from. So this is what people also call an HR interview, right? Sometimes it's the same thing. These are always, the questions usually start with, tell me about a time when. The other interview is your technical interview, which is more related to the technical skills that are specific to the job that you're applying for. So this could be one where they ask you to write a code during the interview. They could ask you questions about mechanical engineering because you're applying for a job in the automobile industry. So it could be any of those things, right? It's a technical interview specific to skills you've gained in college. And this is something I'm not going to spend too much time talking about here because that's going to be very different for all of you. Just the three people who introduced themselves so far are from three different departments, right? Triple E, civil and mechanical. So it's really impossible for us to cover all of the types of technical interviews. And honestly, your professors, your peers, and your CPC committees are going to do a better job at preparing you for these things. The third type of interview is a case interview. This is very popular when you're recruiting for consulting jobs, management consulting jobs. But I've also increasingly seen it being used in other areas recently, especially sales and marketing jobs or product management jobs recently. What is a case interview? They give you an example of a situation you might face on the job, right? It's quite similar to a technical interview. So for example, if you are a product manager, right, and you need to launch a new product or a new feature on an existing product, like let's say it's a company that has an app. It's an app that helps you book cars, right? Similar to your Ola or Uber, it's a new startup. And you need to launch a new feature on that. For example, the interviewer might ask you, if you're launching this new feature, tell me how you would go about it. What are the steps you would take? Now, and you'll need to talk about everything right from, maybe first I'll look at the demand for this. I'll look at what customers want. I'll look at their movement on the app, look at those patterns, and then figure out that this is an area of need. We look at survey responses that our customers have given and identify this is what customers need. Then what I'll do is go to my technical team and look at how long it will take to roll out this feature. How does it integrate with other features on my, probably like lots of questions like this, right? And when you're answering these things, they get to see your thought process. If you were a product manager in their company, how would you approach this problem? That's what they're trying to judge in a case interview. How do you prepare for these types of interviews? Now, technical and case is very specific to the job, and it's going to be something that you train for later. But for behavioral interviews, one thing that's really helped me a lot in the past is make a list of your key experiences and spend time on this, right? Take a piece of paper, take a Word document, Excel sheet, whatever works best for you, and make a list of all of the key experiences in your life. And nothing is too big or too small, because it's really about what you took away from that situation. So, you can write about, for example, when you were the captain of your school basketball team. You can speak about when you went and participated in a competition outside of your school and how that experience was. You can talk about how you stood for hostel secretary elections and that experience. So it could be anything, right? So make a list of key experiences in your life. And ideally, you guys should start making this list now, because our memories don't serve us very well when we're under pressure or when we're right before an interview. Ideally, you can start making this list now and keep adding to it as and when more things happen. But if not, at least take 2 to 3 days before an interview to work on this list and identify all of your key experiences. The other thing under preparation is to know your interviewer, right? So the most important thing for any public speaking, the first thing people tell you is to know your audience, right? Know thy audience. You've probably heard of that. And in an interview, your audience is your interviewer. And by that, I don't just mean the person or the people sitting in front of you, the specific person who's interviewing you. I also mean the organization that is interviewing you, right? So in some cases, you'll already know who your interviewer is. In that case, by all means, do your research, right? Things like LinkedIn are a great resource. They've really made these things very, very easy for us to get to know what someone's professional background is. And you can customize the questions that you have for them specific to their background. And they'll really appreciate it, right? They'll know that you've done your research and you've taken effort before coming to this interview. So that's a great thing to do. But in most cases, like all of us, you won't know who exactly is going to interview. You won't know the people, but you'll know the organization. So for example, when you come to a JSPF interview, you know that it's someone from JSPF or someone representing JSPF who's interviewing you. So you know the organization. So take your time to do your research about the organization, right? So let's take the same example of JSPF. Let's say you were going to a JSPF interview. What do you think is, as part of your research, what do you think is one of the things that you should know about, that you should learn before you go to this interview? Does someone want to try that? What do you think you should research before going to a JSP? There are no wrong answers, guys. Just shoot in the dark. I'm gonna actually pick someone to answer if we don't have another volunteer. So I see from Harshit in the chat, past finalist suggestions. Yes, that's definitely something you need to do by knowing your interviewer. So you should speak to past finalists and understand what did they get asked in their interview so that you can be better prepared for it. Spot on. Parth, what do they do and their areas of activity? So do you mean JSPF or do you mean your specific interviewer, Parth? As an organization, okay. So as an organization, what does JSPF do and what are their activities? Absolutely, you're right. So JSPF has a scholarship, but what if they have a couple of other initiatives, something else they work on campus? You should know about that. Spot on. Harshit, purpose of the interview. Very good. Absolutely. What is the purpose of this interview? Is it something that you're doing for finalists to choose the person who you're selecting, or is it a pre-interview to choose finalists, for example? And the approach will be very different between these two. Are you looking to go from a group of 10 to 1? Are you looking to go from a group of 100 to 10? What is the purpose of that particular interview? What are they trying to judge from you in that interview? Spot on. Any other answers, guys? If anyone wants to unmute themselves and talk, that's also great. What are the judging criteria? Yes, great, Harshit. So this is information that might not always be accessible to you. You might not they might not always be willing to reveal what the judging criteria are, but in some cases people are, and it's very important to ask and to know always. So you're spot on. Okay, why don't I put the question this way? So JSPF is an organization that speaks about its values in multiple forums. So can someone tell me what are the 4 JSPF values?
One is growth mindset, I guess.
Yes, very good, Parvat. Growth mindset is one. Does anyone else want to take a shot at it? There's really no wrong answer. Maybe we'll get some good ideas also from this. So go ahead. Growth mindset, yes, Harshit has also got that right. That's one. I'm going to give you a clue and give you one more, and then you guys can try the other two. So one more is curiosity to explore. So we've got curiosity to explore, growth mindset. What are the other two values? You guys literally have your laptop.
Diversity and inclusion.
Diversity and inclusion. Yes. So that's a great priority and an objective of the scholarship. You're right, but it's not one of the 4 values. Path says opportunities. That's close, but again, not one of the values. I see awareness from Harshini.
I think providing towards the society and community, since we had to write an essay on that also.
Very close. So one of the values is will to make a difference. So that's very, very close. And it's one of the things about, making an impact on society, making a difference. So will to make a difference, curiosity to explore. I see perseverance from Harshit. That's the third one. Discipline to persevere. That's the third one. Discipline to persevere and growth mindset. So these are the 4 values of the JSPF organization. So this is a more nuanced way. It's something that's not very obvious that this is something you have to prepare, but is very, very important. So if you're coming for a JSPF interview, for example, this would be part of knowing your interviewer, just knowing what are the 4 values of the JSPF organization, right? Because you need to know that that's what matters to the company or to the organization, to the scholarship committee, to the university, whatever it is that you're applying to. That's what matters to them. So you need to know that in every interview, they're trying to judge your fit against these values. So every application process has multiple stages, right? You have your resume, you write your essays, you probably write tests. So there's all these different stages. Why do people have an interview, first of all? An interview is usually the step that people use to judge your cultural fit to that organization, your cultural fit to that company. Because the only way to truly do that is by speaking to someone in person, face to face. So when someone's looking for a cultural fit, what is the fit against? What are you fitting into? You're fitting into the core values of that company or that organization. So knowing a company's values is one of the most critical things when you're preparing for an interview, to know that interview. So this is called different things in different companies, right? Like some places won't call it values, they'll call it their purpose. Some places will call it their vision. But whatever information they put out there about what that organization stands for, you need to make sure you know that really well before you go into the interview. So that's one. So we already addressed this. What are the 4 JSPF values? Then the next one is knowing your application. Now, this might seem like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised at how often we miss to do this really critical step. So knowing your application means knowing the materials that you submitted, right? Your resume, your essay, just going through it and being very thorough about every word that you've put in there, because that's often the blueprint for your interview. Even if an interviewer has no questions prepared, right? In a lot of interviews, they don't come in with a predefined set of questions in their mind. All they come in is with your resume, for example, or your essay. And that's what they're building off of. They're asking you questions based on what is on the page. So it's very important to know that in and out. And to understand this better, let's do an activity, right? Now, this is an example application essay from one of the past JSPF finalists. This is on our Medium channel. The essay is titled The Art of Automation, right? It's for the community essay. Can you anticipate 2 interview questions based on this excerpt of the essay? So this is not the whole essay. This is just one paragraph from the introduction that I've just pasted. So I know you guys don't know the rest of the essay. That's fine. You can read the whole essay on our Medium channel later. But for now, I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to go through this. And why don't you try to think of 2 interview questions, if you were an interviewer, that you would ask this candidate if this is what they've submitted beforehand. It's 10:49, so I'll give you guys till 10:51. Just think about it and then raise your hands to tell me a potential interview question. There is, of course, no right or wrong answer, but what might occur to you as a question might not occur to someone else. So it's really just about sharing between you guys. You're not sharing to me. Go through this and take 2 minutes. All right. So who wants to go first? I don't see any raised hands yet. Who's going to go first? Just any 2 interview questions based on this essay, The Art of Automation. Come on, guys. I'm going to call on people. Anu. Yes, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so one that I can think of is how do behavioral algorithms work and how they are used today. And another one, I'm not really sure of this, but what is a new area in which automation can bring about a big difference?
These are great questions. These are actually extremely good questions, right? And that's the sort of thing an interviewer would like to understand. So you had an option to pick any topic when you're speaking about for the community, and you chose automation and you want to write about it. So they want to understand how much have you thought about it, right? And these are 2 questions that really test that. They're not very specific. Just because you have a for the community automation essay, nobody's going to ask you, do you like what is some automation software, or do you know, like I'm sorry I sound really blank on this because I don't know much about this, but the point is no one's going to ask you a technical question about it, but they're going to try to judge your understanding of this issue, right? So do you understand it well enough? Why have you chosen this? These are some of the areas they will want to explore. So I see something from Harshit in the chat. Is the automation that important and necessary? If yes, how will it affect humans? That's a great question as well. Yes, Parth.
uh, Automation, is currently replacing the humans, as you have said in the essay. Then doesn't it mean that, the economic, the employment of a human could start to rapidly decrease in coming few years? So wouldn't be like if we would replace you with a machine, we wouldn't be requiring you, or we wouldn't having an interview with you. And what's your take in that?
Absolutely. I love how you ended that question with saying, what's your take on that? And that is what any good interviewer will do as well, because they're not trying to prove their point of view on you, right? You don't need to go in trying to predict what's my interviewer going to want to hear here. But they're going to try to understand what is your point of view, what is your take on this. So I really like that phrasing, and that's one of, and you can think of many questions which end with what's your take on that, right? So that's a great question. If it's going to replace humans, if it's going to lead to a loss of jobs, then is it necessarily good? So what is your conclusion in this article? Do you believe it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Are there risks that we have to overcome? Great questions. We have time for one more. So does someone want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, like the quote that he has mentioned, Tom Preston. So like my question that I thought is like, what type of person like you are, whether you are the one who likes to do some automation to create some automation, or you hate doing automation like that.
Nice, very nice. I like how you're thinking. So are you a one who likes to create automation? Are you someone who likes getting automated? Nice question. It's also the kind of thing that probably breaks the ice in the beginning. So great, guys, really solid stuff. So I think you get an idea of how you can prepare for an interview, right? Like do this for yourself. You know what essays you've submitted, you know what resume you've submitted. Sit with it by yourself, try to write down what can someone possibly ask based on what I've written, and try to anticipate questions and think of answers. You might not get the exact same questions, but what you would have practiced is being able to interpret your own text in different ways and answer on the spot for it. So that's something you would have practiced. So that's great. So we're done with preparation, right? So what's the next one? Can someone tell me?
Presentation.
Presentation. Spot on, Harshni. So we're in presentation. So in presentation, there's essentially two big topics that we need to cover. The first one under presentation is presenting yourself, right? Creating a good first impression, how you present yourself for an interview. And this is really, really important. I'm sure you've all read, all your No Second Chance to Create a First Impression and things of that sort, right? Very, very critical to create a good first impression. So get the basics right. That's really the advice here, right? Get the basics right. Be very professional. Don't be very casual. Inquire about the dress code for your interview in advance. Some organizations are very casual, so it's perfectly okay to go in casual wear. Some are extremely formal. You might need to go with a tie, with your blazer. There are some organizations which prefer business casual for your interview, for you to be more comfortable while also being professional. So inquire about the dress code. This is not a wrong question to ask at all. You can always ask this question to organizers of any program that you're applying to. Inquire about this and adhere to it. The other critical thing is to always arrive on time. This again might seem like a no-brainer, but it goes a very, very long way in creating a first impression. I read an article recently about how, because of COVID for the past year, lots of interviews have been virtual, right? They've been on Zoom. So I read an article about the psychological impact that you arriving 5 minutes early in the Zoom waiting room creates on your interviewer, right? So like such a tiny thing, it creates a psychological impact on them where they feel like, oh, this is a very prompt person, organized person. They know what they're doing, right? Just 5 minutes early. If your interview's at 12, you're at 11:55, you're in the waiting room of the Zoom. They might just let you in at 12, but at least they know that you're here on time and you're ready. So that's another small thing that you can really keep in mind. The third thing under first impressions is to look very self-assured and confident, right? Looking very confident. And I know this is something that's easier said than done. We're all nervous for interviews. I'm also extremely nervous before I have to go on stage or talk to someone or, before an interview. But what's important to remember here is that if you've done the first step, which is our preparation step, then you've already overcome half the problem in terms of being confident. You've prepared well, that will give you an innate confidence. So you will feel ready for taking on whatever comes your way in the interview. So that's one big tip for confidence, right? But the other thing, which is a big giveaway of our nervousness, is our body language in an interview. And this is not just important in person, but it's equally evident on camera, right? Where your body language can really give away how nervous you are in a situation. And how do you give away how nervous you are? One is excessive stuttering, right? The other is when you're fidgeting, when you're constantly moving, you're like bobbing, you're constantly touching your hair, your face, and you're like doing this and you're folding your arms, you're doing all of these things. That's fidgeting. So this is also something that gives away how nervous you are and doesn't give you an aura of being confident. Another problem there is that it's very distracting also. You want them to listen to what you're saying, right? You don't want them to be focused on how you're constantly shaking your legs or touching your face, right? So fidgeting is another big sign of a lack of confidence. So first one, let's talk about stuttering, right? And how do you overcome that? 2 ways to overcome that. One, of course, is just practice, right? Lots and lots and lots of practice. Before any interview, find a friend, find someone in your family, write down questions. In the preparation step, you're already anticipating questions. So you've got a list of 4 or 5 questions that you think they're going to ask. Get them to ask you those questions and respond to them as though you're in the actual interview, right? Just keep practicing and trust me, it will go a long way. Even if you're not saying the same words in the interview, the practice is not for those exact words. The practice is for the ability to translate your thoughts into coherent and articulate sentences. That's what the practice is for. So that's one big thing. The other thing with respect to your speech is to go slow, right? We all tend to speak very fast. This is especially a trait that Indians have, right? We speak extremely fast. We tend to ramble. Come that consciously slow down your speech. And how you practice this is, let's say you have classes or group activities. Record yourself, right? Or time yourself and try to see how many words you're saying in a minute. It's probably really high. And keep small targets for yourself for reducing the number of words. And then over time, you'll get there. Another is to strategically use pauses, right? Pause as much as you can in your speech. Let your audience process what you're saying. It may seem awkward initially, but it helps your interviewer understand what you're saying instead of you rambling on. So remember to pause. These are 2 things to make sure it doesn't come through in your speech. With respect to body language, different things work for different people because our fidgeting habits are also different, right? For some, it's shaking legs, for some, it's hands, etc. One thing that can help is that when your interviewer is speaking, when you're listening, that's when people tend to fidget a lot because you're not doing anything, you're not speaking, so you tend to fidget. So, you can clasp your hands, which is basically keep them together and put it on your lap. So that way there's something holding down your legs subconsciously and your hands are together so they can't be touching anything. So consciously do that. Just clasp your hands and put it on your legs and you'll see, it might not fix it, but you'll see a big difference in that. But when you're speaking, when you are the one speaking, how do you control fidgeting? For me, what works is using my hands. And by now you've probably noticed that I use my hands a lot when I talk. I speak with my hands and that really helps because then my hands aren't doing anything else. So that's an excellent way to control it when you're speaking. The same clasping and putting on your legs can also work while speaking. Instead, if you don't want to use your hands. So to each your own. So really focus on your body language. And even if you're not feeling so confident, it's about giving off the aura that you are. So this would be it in terms of just making the right first impression, right? To recap, present yourself, be professional in terms of dress code, inquiring about all of the quorum for the interview, arrive on time, arrive early, and be self-assured and confident by making sure you're speaking slow and correcting your body language giveaways. So this is in terms of first impressions. The other very important thing in presentation is how you introduce yourself, because whether it's a behavioral or a technical or a case interview, whether it's your round 1 or round 2 or round 3, doesn't matter, whichever interview it is, one question you always know is going to come is tell me about yourself or introduce yourself, right? And this is often the first question that comes as well. So it's a great chance to make an excellent first impression. So how do you really nail this question? How do you ace the introduce yourself question? Let's talk about that a little bit. Yes. So the first thing you need to do with that is to show a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, right? Look excited to be there. And energy is everything because it's very contagious. When you're showing enthusiasm, that enthusiasm is contagious and it will pass on to the person who's on the other side as well. They'll really see that you love what you're doing, you're very passionate about this, and you really love being here. So, and this is such a simple hack, right? Like you just need to smile, you just need to look excited, give yourself a little pep talk before you go into the interview and just be confident, just be there, be present and be very enthusiastic because it's going to be contagious. The other big tip for introducing yourself is to make it personal because that's always interesting. Now, when I say, personal, I don't mean like this. I don't mean when they ask you to tell you about yourself, you don't need to say, I like pie or just talk about really obscure interests of yours that won't really matter to this. But make it personal within reasonable limits. In the sense, don't be afraid to divulge additional information about you that you think is going to make this very interesting. Just because someone advised you that it has to be, if it's tell me about yourself, you don't have to look at them, stare at them blankly and be like, hello, I am XYZ, I am from this department, I am from this city, and then keep quiet. You can speak a little bit more about your interests. It could be a technical interview where maybe they don't care about your interest in some extracurricular activity, but go ahead and tell them, because that's what sets you apart from the other people who are interviewing for the same position or for the same scholarship or whatever it is that you're interviewing for, right? What sets you apart is that extracurricular interest, is that personal interest, that hobby, maybe a project within that field, something technical, but a project that you took up and did on your own that you think was really interesting for you and you learned a lot about. So talk about that little extra tidbit of information that makes it interesting for that person. Like they've been hearing 10, 20 people before you with the exact same kind of introduction. But this is something that will make them perk up and listen to what you're saying. So make it personal and interesting. The third one is to, if you struggle with, I've prepared an introduction. I have these 4 points I want to say, but I might forget this. How do I remember 4 points? What if I go blank in between? Anytime you're afraid of forgetting, what really helps is using a framework, right? Like sometimes when we study, we all tend to put acronyms, right? If there are like 5 types of something, and then you want to remember them, we take the first alphabet of each and you try to make a word out of it. And that helps you remember in the exam, right? Same trick everywhere in life, which is use some kind of framework to help you remember. And what helps me in the introduce yourself question is to use a past, present, and future framework. Talk about something from the past that you've done. For me, that would be, I've graduated from NIT Trichy in the instrumentation and control engineering department. And then I worked at Procter & Gamble as a process engineer and then a project manager. This is my past. Then talk about your present. So present is right now, I work at a company called Ubuntu, where I'm a management consultant, where I help clients solve sustainability challenges. And then speak about your future, which is, in the future, I want to learn more about sustainability and how to employ that in business. So I'm going to the University of Michigan to do an MBA. So that's your past, present, and future framework, right? That's very easy to remember. And then you can add some embellishments to it here and there, some extra points. So that's something you can use. Then the last one is to highlight the things that you want your interviewer to know about you, because this is the first question in an interview and it sets the tone for the rest of the interview. So for example, if it is an interview where, you really want them to ask you about one experience because you think you've done a great job with that, but you're afraid they might not want to, this is a great place to slyly introduce it, right? Like don't be really random, like, talking about my job and then suddenly if I say, in my final year, I did a project on retinal fundus imaging. That's super random. Like they'll just be like, why is she talking about that? It's been 3 years since I graduated from college, right? So don't be so random, but try to find a link to what you're saying and connect it to some kind of interest, right? And so talk about the things you want your interviewer to ask you about so that you direct the flow of conversation. So these are the tips. Show enthusiasm, make it personal, use a past, present, future framework, and highlight the things you want your interviewer to know about you. And I'm going to give you an example now. Hi, I'm XYZ from ABC. I really loved studying physics in school and participated in many quizzes and contests. So I took up mechanical engineering in NIT Trichy, and I want to learn more about automobiles in the next few years. I also like painting. And though I couldn't do much in 11th and 12th because I was very busy with preparation for my JEE and my 90 entrance exams, being at home during the pandemic has given me a lot of time to pursue it recently. So tell me how that sounds versus a really blank introduction that the person might otherwise have gone with, where they just say, hi, I'm from the city. I'm pursuing mechanical engineering in NIT Trichy. I'm interested in this career. and that's it. How does this sound versus that? And it's really small changes, right? So you can see that each of these things are employed there. So first of all, when you're saying I really loved physics, I love physics, and that's why I'm doing NIT, mechanical in NIT. You're speaking about what you're passionate about. Talk about your interests. Now this might be, untrue in your case, but you might love something else. Or you could say, I love cars, right? And that's why I want to do mechanical and I want to learn about automobiles. I really have loved cars from when I was a kid. So it could be anything for you, but just using that word, talking about something that makes you come alive, really transmits that energy and that passion to the other person. It's also personal, right? You're talking about your interests. You're talking about your interest in automobiles. That's something you want to do. You're bringing in a personal element where you're talking about your hobby you might think for this interview, why does my hobby matter? It really matters because that helps you make a human connection with the other person. So you're talking about your interest in painting. That's a hobby, right? You're making it really personal and interesting. So, 7 out of 10 times, if you give this introduction, the other person is going to comment on this last part. The really loud bird is back. I'm very sorry about that, but I hope you guys can still hear me. But yeah, so 7 out of 10 times, I promise you, the interviewer is going to ask you about the last point, about your interest in painting. Maybe they'll say, oh, I also love painting. Or like, oh, what do you like painting? Do you do like acrylic? Do you do canvas, oil, something of that sort. So that also is another element. Past, present, future. Do you see how the past, present, future is used here? You liked physics in school. In school, you did a lot of competitions. That's how you realized that interest. Now you're doing mechanical. In the future, you want to learn about automobiles. You want to specialize in that. So that's the past, present, future framework. Highlight the things you want your interviewer to know about you. Here, maybe, for example, if I just say mechanical, they might not realize that I'm an auto enthusiast. But if you say this, maybe they're going to ask you about automobiles specifically. Maybe they're going to say, oh, why automobiles? Why is that something specifically you're interested in? So do you see how all the elements are employed in this? So now what we're going to do is take 2 minutes for all of you to write down your introduction using this framework. Key things to remember: first is enthusiasm, second is past, present, future, and making it personal. So I want all of you to write this down, and then I'm going to call on a few people to read out their introduction. It's perfectly okay if you read out from your piece of paper. I can't see you, so it's totally cool. But just take a moment to write this down and sound enthusiastic when you're delivering it. I'm going to go back to this slide so that you can refer to these pointers. Is everyone clear? Do you need me to explain any part of this again? Just 2 minutes, because I just realized we're almost out of time and we have a lot to get through. Okay, are we ready? Do we have any brave volunteers? See, there's an even harder activity coming up, and if you volunteer for this, I won't call you for that one. I'm literally bribing you guys at this point. Who wants to go first, guys?
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay, yes, go for it, Parvat.
Yeah, I'm Parvat from Chennai, Tamil Nadu. I love doing various things. Like I always try to do different things. I don't do a thing, but in a to a particular domain. And I like participating in various different competitions so that I can learn new things in each. Like I participate in coding competition, I participate in speaking, so that I can learn something from everything. um, and my recent interest is like about Photoshop and coding, and like recently in coding I have downloaded Linux, which interests me a lot in bash scripting. So these are the things that I really like about, and one of the things is, like as I said, it's participating in different things and involving in various activities.
Awesome, really good job, Parvat. So do you guys, so Parvat was actually one of the people who introduced himself in the beginning of this talk. So do you see the difference? Do you see the difference in how passionate he sounds, how interesting he sounds? You want to know more about this guy, right now? So do you see the difference between the beginning and now? So great job, Parvat, really good start. Who wants to go next? Harshit, I'm going to request you to come on audio and do that. Would that be okay? You can just read out the same thing. That's totally fine. Are you there, Harshit? Okay, he has some mic issues. No problem. But great write-up, Harshit. I like that you followed the future, the framework, as well as talking about what you love. Nantesh, do you want to go next?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, I'm Nandesh from Teni. I really loved learning the design approach of classical physics, and thus I took mechanical engineering in NITT. And I want to learn the ways of putting that in paper like 3D modeling for coming years. I also loved editing, and I'm getting familiar with Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve in this quarantine times.
Excellent. I love it. That is really, really good. It tells me a lot about your interests, your areas. It tells me what you really like doing. Wonderful. Let's go for one last. Anu.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Anushree from, I'm a native of Tamil Nadu, but I was brought up in UAE, and I feel like that is, so I grew up watching, sorry, one second.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very accepting space, and I feel like that's something I want to bring in other parts of the world, wherever I am. And recently I've gotten into design, so I would like to, at some point, bring inclusivity in the things that I design. Right now I'm doing graphic design, but I also hope to go into like more technical design as well later. That's all.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that. I love how, so this is a perfect example of how you can make it personal, right? She started with a personal tidbit about how she grew up in an accepting space, and that's shaped what she wants to do. I love it. That's a great example of that. Maybe we'll take one more. Parth.
Yeah, so good morning. I'm Parth Srivastava from EEE department. So from my past, I've been intrigued by mix of logic, algorithm, and creativity. Hence, I feel this job profile can fit for me. And I have also recently discovered a new writing skill as a new hobby. And I also think that I can also contribute in the areas of content and creative writing, which can also add an additional contribution to your profile. And I have also excelled in, various softwares like MS Excel and Word. So I think that would be also great for the profile. I mean, the interview ended at MS Excel. Don't know. I didn't have much time to write. So.
No worries at all. It's a great start, and I hope hearing from for all of you, from hearing from each other, you're getting more and more ideas about how you can shape your introduction. This is really solid, guys. I hope for the next interview, this is one less thing you have to worry about. Love it. Just the final section now, which is, so we spoke about preparation, we spoke about presentation, and then we're going to speak about structure and timing. So in structure and timing, there are some key things that I want you guys to remember. The first is the format of your answers, right? And something that people commonly use is the STAR format. So what I mean by the STAR format, STAR, it's also called CAR in some places, CAR. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Or CAR alternately stands for context, action, and result. So in this format, what you're essentially going to do is first speak about the situation, which is an event, a project, or a challenge that you faced. Then speak about the task, your responsibilities and assignments for that situation, right? So in that situation, for example, what was your responsibility? Then you speak about the action you took. And then finally, you speak about what was the result of that action. What I've often noticed people end up doing is you start off by saying, I achieved this and I had this result and, I delivered these many things in that. You straight away talk about the result. And then people explain, oh, actually, the thing I'm talking about is this club in college and this is my position in that club and this was the activity I had to do. The problem with that is because when you're speaking about the result, the person has no idea what was even the context, what was even the situation. The person has no idea. So they haven't even processed your result. They haven't even realized the magnitude of what you have done. But when you go in this order and talk about result in the end, they truly understand how big a deal what you did was. The other big advantage of this is that this gives you the ability to be structured. And when there is structure, people always remember better. So the interviewer, when they leave the interview, will know what you said. It's more memorable, your answer. So which is why this format is very, very important. The other important thing is basically the timing of your interview, right? Where when I say mirror your interviewer, what I mean is if you feel that they're being chatty, they're talking a lot and they're quite friendly or they're quite casual, mirror that, right? Reciprocate and be similar. But if you feel they're all business, right? They want to wrap this up quickly and they're talking only about the important things and they're very, very formal, mirror that, right? You need to be similar. You need to be very formal in the approach and you need to be very concise in your answers as well. So approach your timing similarly. This table, you don't need to memorize it on anything. There's versions of this available on the internet. But why I put this chart is because you need to know overall timing and how your interview is going to be. So if you have a 30-minute interview, you need to plan at least for the last 5 minutes where you get to ask them questions, or if there's some kind of wrap up. So try to make sure your answers don't keep droning on so that you disturb this balance, because that will make your interviewer on edge. It will make them a little, little finicky and like nervous for whether they're going to be able to wrap it up on time. Make sure at any point of time, you are not speaking for more than 5 minutes. If you are, you have to break down your answer. You have to break it up into smaller bits. 3 minutes is ideal. Worst case, you're speaking for 5 minutes, because otherwise nobody's able to hold their attention longer than that. As I'm sure you are all realizing by my very long lecture at this point that it's hard to hold your attention. One final thing, interviewing for the virtual world, which is basically Zoom charisma, right? So today, most of your interviews are going to be virtual. The JSPF is going to be virtual. Most other things are as well. So in that case, how do you have some charisma when you're on Zoom and you're not able to be in person in front of someone? Few simple things. One is place your laptop at a height, right? Like right now, my laptop is on a couple of books, because otherwise it will be like this, right? Or you will be looking at me from down, and it's like I'm looking down at you, and that doesn't look good, right? You want to be at eye level to your camera. So, I almost disturbed my balance of books now. So interviewing for the virtual world, make sure you place your laptop at a height so that you're at eye level for your laptop. You're not looking down at it or looking up at it. Neither of those things is good. And it makes a big difference. Take care of the little things, right? For example, like your lighting, make sure you're well lit. There is light on your face. You don't have a distracting background with a lot going on. Make sure you're taking care of background noise, like inform your family or whoever you're living with that, I have this important thing coming up, so try not to make background noise. I cannot inform this bird, unfortunately, but wherever you can, try to get rid of your distracting background noise. Try to maintain eye contact. That's an excellent thing. So when you're virtual, one big thing is that you don't have to even look at the person. If that makes you nervous, if looking at a person makes you nervous, you don't even have to do it. Put like a little sticker near your webcam, right? Put a smiley face or something there. And you can just look at that the whole time when you're answering. Just keep looking at that smiley face. It'll make you also happy. You feel like someone's smiling back at you. So you don't even need to look at your interviewer's response. That's a big advantage of virtual interviews. So take advantage of that. Final thing, if your internet stops working or if there's a technical glitch, don't panic, right? Because we're all trying very hard to make things work in a virtual world, make things work when you're working from home in a pandemic. So people are a lot more understanding than you think. People are very understanding of these issues. So really don't panic. You don't, owe anyone an explanation. You just let them know that you haven't had an internet issue and your interviewer will understand and you can come back and reconnect. So some few tips for the virtual world. I really need to wrap up in 4 minutes because you guys have your Q&A after this. So I'm going to run through the JSPF interview process very quickly. So for JSPF, if you've done all the things we've spoken about so far, you're set. You are absolutely set for really acing the JSPF interview. And I hope you all do very well, that they're going to have a struggle identifying who the finalists are and who the final winner is. So I really hope you guys perform that well in your interviews. There are going to be 2 interviews in the process. They will happen sometime in the first or the second week of August. Both interviews will be on the same day. They will be virtual on Zoom. The first one is called an application interview, where you'll have a panel of NIT alumni and faculty. It's for 30 minutes, and they'll ask you questions based on your application, right? What you have written in your application. The second interview is called a value-based interview, which will be shorter for 20 minutes. And the person taking that is going to be either a past mentor or like past panelists in JSPF interviews. And this will be something that's based on values of the JSPF community, which also you are prepared for today because we just spoke about the 4 values. So as long as you guys, delve into those a bit deeper, you're set for the second interview as well. I'm going to give you a couple of sample questions. So for the application interview, for example, on the community essay, how did you go about knowing that this is a real problem and not something that you thought was a problem? Right now, you guys can come up with a lot more questions than this. We just went over a sample community essay. So, and you all came up with really great questions. I think all of those are likely to be actual questions in your interview. This is one such example. So that's how your application interview is going to go. Second, how do you plan to contribute to the JSPF community now that you are part of it as a finalist? So this is another potential application interview question. For the value-based interview, one question could be, what is growth mindset, right? So one of the 4 values, what does it mean to you? What do you understand of growth mindset? And the second is, tell us about a time when you think you made a difference in someone's life. This is an example, if you remember, from the behavioral interview type, right? Tell me about a time when. And if you have made a list of your experiences beforehand, preparing for this interview, off the top of your head, you probably have 2 to 3 answers for this question. If you have that list handy, you won't be scrambling in the interview, right? It need not be a huge deal. Even personal stories and random acts of kindness work. So if you've got that list, you're all set. So these are some sample questions for JSPF. And I think what we've covered so far prepares you for it. Best of luck to all of you. I really hope you learn a lot from this experience and you have a great time in the remaining 3 years of college as well. Feel free to reach out to us at this email ID. If you have any questions at any point of time, you guys can add me on LinkedIn. You also have my email ID. So feel free to reach out if you have questions for me as well. Shiva, do we have just like 2 minutes to take any live questions if people have them? I know we have the Q&A that we need to start.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't have like 2 Zoom meetings going on at the same time. So, yeah.
Is it the same crowd or do we have different students coming in?
It is the same students, actually.
Okay. So they won't be quitting and having, like, we won't have people in the waiting room though, right? Then.
I'm not exactly sure actually. But yeah, I mean, if you want to have a Q&A, yeah, just go ahead and do it fast.
Maybe I'll just take one question to make sure there's nothing big and glaring. Sorry about that. Sorry we went over time. I actually thought we'd end up finishing early. Guys, any questions? Does someone have a question that they want to ask right away? It can be about any of the two topics, anything in general. All right, actually, then we can wrap up on time perfectly on 11:30. Thank you so much. Oh, Anushri, yes. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering what kinds of questions are candidates usually asking to interviewers?
Oh, yes, yes. Great question. In an interview, if someone says, do you have any questions for me? You should always have something prepared to ask them. One category is to ask about the company or the organization. So if you're going for a job, for example, you can ask them, what is the culture of the organization like? How is your work-life balance usually? Or for example, listen to them, right? Listen to what they are saying and try to echo that. You told me that you've been in this company for 22 years. That's a really long time. So what has led you to stay with this firm for so many years? Right? What has motivated you to stick to them for so many years? That shows that you listen to what they're saying, as well as asking a question based on that. You can also ask about the particular job, right? That you're, for example, or an internship or a project. You can ask for more details about that. So these are some potential things you can do. Yes, Parth.
I wanted to ask, about how to improve your speaking skills or public speaking skills. Sometimes, we have really great answers breathing in our mind, but, with the help of words, we sometimes, fumble in between an interview because we don't know how to speak in front of people. To improve, how to deliver your answer as you want it to be delivered.
Right, absolutely. Great question again. I'd say two big things that work for me, right? One is structure. For every answer, try to find structure. If it's an introduction, remember it as past, present, future. And then you won't fumble because in your head, you're not thinking of, there's 10 different points I have to say. You're just thinking, what's my present like? And then you'll answer it. That's one big thing that works for me. In behavioral questions, the STAR format, right? That is some structure. You're thinking in terms of situation, task, action, result. So that will really help you, the STAR format. So you can remember that.
Yeah, in some, really rapid question or some tricky question which you really didn't expected, then you don't have much time to think, about
right.
situation
Another thing that
task and all that. But you have to immediately answer with your instinct. So then how do you tackle that?
Right. So another thing we often tend to assume is that people want a rapid answer. Trust me, in no interview will someone expect a rapid answer, right? So in every interview, it's perfectly okay to say, can I take a couple of minutes to think about that? And then don't sit quiet for 5 minutes. That's a little awkward, but you can take a minute or two to think about your answer before you say it. In many interviews, they also allow you to have a paper and a pen, so you can write down a few points before you answer them. So that's perfectly acceptable. That's something you can do. The other important thing is to maybe what's not in your control is the timing of your answer when you have to get back. But what's definitely in your control is the speed of your speech. And we all tend to speak really fast. We tend to ramble. So pause, speak as slowly as you can because it gives your head time to process what you're going to say next. Also gives them time to process what you are saying. So speak really slowly. That's another thing that I've found to be helpful. Practicing with a partner, that's also incredibly helpful because you might not get the same questions in your interview, but you're practicing the skill, what you just said, right? Thinking on your feet. How do you rapidly answer? That is a skill that you can hone by practicing, even if you're not practicing the exact same answers. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we should wrap up now, or Shiva is going to kill me. But thank you, everyone. This has been great. I really enjoyed doing this. I hope you guys liked it too, and you had something to take away from this. And good luck for the rest of your process. Shiva, we can wrap up.